Ooh, the most above average podcast in the galaxy.
Turn the light off, like your memory
Before we start today's podcast, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you. The most above average podcast in the galaxy is not sponsored by anyone. Everything that you see and hear is paid for directly by us. We do, however, have affiliate links, and the money that comes in from those affiliates does help pay for us to have more hosting platforms, better equipment so you can hear us better, so you can see us better. The money that comes in from that is just icing on the cake. We do this out of the pure love of just chit-chatting with each other and bringing on guests. If you would like for the show to continue, we ask you to support the ones that support us. Again, all the links are in the bio. And thank you, and we hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the most above average podcast in the galaxy. Today is a special day, and no, not just because I am drinking my delicious caffeine, which is, what flavor is this? Mango passion fruit. I got it just because it had a cool logo on it, but truth be told, it's pretty tasty. Fun fact, caffeine does not give you energy. Completely mislabeled. What it's actually doing is blocking adenosine. So the thing that gives you that sleepy, that like, I'm kind of going down vibe, it just temporarily inhibits that. So when you overdo caffeine, you're not giving yourself more energy. You're just preventing the brrr. Fun fact. So today, my friends, like always, my bearded co-host, Josh, who's looking extra burly today. I think you sneezed and the sleeves just blew off, man. What's going on there?
They did. I don't need them.
It's sleeves. Sleeves are so overrated. Who needs them? Today we are joined by a good friend of mine, and I'm super excited that he was able to take some time off from his day. Brandon, also known as the Biohacking You. Welcome, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me on. I'm really excited to come kind of talk about nootropics, and I have a beard, but I feel a little inferior right now with your guys' beards. I can grow it out, but it's trimmed. So I feel a little inferior, but that's okay.
That's okay. You got like the Johnny Depp beard going on.
Yeah.
It's got some character. It's got character.
It does. It gets long in the winter, but now I'm in Southern California, so I keep it kind of trim. But I mean, I feel inferior. I got you guys with your long, like full luscious beards, and I'm like, I should grow it out a little bit maybe.
Well, I just trim mine. I trim mine like once, maybe 2 times a year. And it was okay. It got to the point where, when you look at yourself in the mirror and you're just like, I don't know who would have sex with me. It got to that kind of look. It wasn't a good beard. It was too much. And we left a concert, and this lady was like, "Oh, you have a terrorist beard." She called me. She said, "I have an Al Qaeda beard." Wow. And I was like, "Okay, it's probably time to trim this thing." So,
oh my, yeah.
So now we're working on the GQ look.
Yeah, it looks good. It's nice, and just depends on who can pull off what length of beard. Some people can get away with longer. Some people can. You got to keep it shorter, or else you'll get comments like that.
Yeah, beards are they're a snowflake. Everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But hey, so the times are changing, and before we dig into the nootropic thing, I did want to go over something. I find it fascinating. Probably some people don't care about it, but I think you should at least understand. The season's changing. Allergies are going to be rampant across everywhere. That's just how it goes. So, by keeping the theme with the nootropics, I did want to touch on something that you may not know that you could be suffering from. Not all antihistamines are treated the same. There's 2 different categories of antihistamines. Why would I bring this up? Because one of them strips choline out of the brain. What is that issue? It gives you fogginess. You impede your memory, short and long term, but it's also opening up the door for long-term issues such as dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. These are all linked to a lack of choline in the brain. So I did the research for you, my friends. I will tell you the popular ones to keep an eye on. And they're not to say that they are bad. You just have to understand that these are not long-term things to utilize. So popular ones, Benadryl, Z-Quil, they use the same one. This is probably one of the more aggressive ones. So when you look at the history of Benadryl and the long-term side effects that it generates, it's pretty astounding. It's definitely something that I would recommend staying away from, but I get why people would take it. You know, you're having a rough night sleeping, you're traveling, you know, you're all stuffy. I get it. But my recommendation would be to look at things similar to Zyrtec, Claritin, Allegra. Now, with that being said, these are all different antihistamines. As far as their ingredients, they are just categorized into two different things. There is still, you have to get a doctor's prescription, but prescription Zyrtec is still far superior than even their over-the-counter one. They will tell you in their marketing that it's the same. It's not the same. I've taken both. The prescription one shits on the other one. So when you look at antihistamines, think about what it's doing for you long-term as well. The nice thing about Zyrtec is also one of the things that is safe for infants to use. God forbid that you have a baby and it has allergies. That would be horrendous, but keep it on your radar. So with that being said, that was a fun little intro. Let's talk about nootropics. Brandon, what is a nootropic? It sounds like such a funny name.
It does, and there's a lot of people in the space. There's actually a lot of debate. So I mean, really, to me, like what a nootropic is it's something that can improve your cognitive function in some capacity, right? And some people like will get really nuanced with it, and they'll be like, technically, like this is a nootropic and this isn't a nootropic, and modafinil and Adderall and stimulants are not nootropics by definition, but you know, this like Semax is a nootropic. People get really caught in the like hard definition of a nootropic, but the way I see it is just they're all can be nootropics because they all do help your brain to perform better. It's just certain, like I always tell people, like when it comes to nootropics, because again we're just talking about how to make your brain perform better, there's so many different classes and categories because everyone has different kind of, you know, psychological and neurological needs. So people get really caught up too, and one of the big things people say is, oh well, like technically, right, like stimulants like Adderall are not nootropics because in the long run, you know, they're not going to be building up your brain in the same way that something like dihexa would, which is a peptide that promotes a growth factor known as hepatocyte growth factor, which is going to be building your memory, your cognitive function, all those things, new neurons in the brain. But then you look kind of in the short term and, okay, what if we use Adderall once or twice per week to boost our cognitive function in conjunction with more of those long-term nootropic strategies? So in short, to me at least, a nootropic is anything that can kind of boost your cognitive performance, cognitive output. And again, it looks different for many people. Some people, their cognitive performance is hindered by anxiety. So a nootropic protocol would be to get them to just calm down. But again, a lot of people get really like technical with the name and they're like, this is a nootropic, but this isn't. I try to keep it a bit of a broader thing just for kind of simplicity so people can understand it a little bit better.
Oh, absolutely. And then when you look at things that are stimulants, and when we're talking about it, you know, what could help you, you know, with mental clarity, things like that. When we say cognitive function, it's getting the brain to work more efficiently so that you're able to have better verbal literacy. You're losing the filler words like things like that. Mm-hmm. And so your mouth and your brain are connected at the same speed. So there's that lack of interruption. I did notice something, and I don't know how much you've dug into this. When we talk about stimulants, you know, there's oh my God, there's so many different stimulants and how they affect the brain and whatnot, and dealing with adrenal fatigue. Caffeine is such a fascinating one because it's so easy to market that, you know, more is so much better. If 100 milligrams is more than you need 300, but the clinical dose of what they say is the optimal amount that you should be taking for a nootropic effect for cognitive function is only 60 milligrams. It's a pretty small amount. Mm-hmm. So when we look at some of these other things, like you talked about modafinil and things like that, do other things that are in the traditional nootropic space, such as Semax, Snoopep, things like that, do they have diminishing returns? Such as if you overdid like a stimulant, like could you overdo one of these peptides? Would it give you a negative effect, or is it, test is best and we're just going to keep going up?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the nootropic you're talking about, but there definitely some of them it'll be, hey, if you want to go pin, a vial of Semax every day, you're going to be raising BDNF. It might not be problematic inherently for your brain. It might be beneficial, but you're going to have more brain fog because, again, you're raising the neurogenesis, right? So there might be, again, as you raise the dosage, there might be things like more side effects. Some of them you raise the dosage up super high and you're just not really going to get a lot, of effects back. So you're just going to be kind of wasting your money, which, I mean, if you're okay with that, you're okay with that, I guess. Some of them, like stimulants, I mean, the more you push stimulants, the better you'll perform that day. But again, you're going to be burning the candles. So you wake up the next day, you go on with your week, and now your dopamine's depleted because you just abused Adderall or modafinil or even caffeine if you take it just tons of caffeine. So stimulants definitely have that point where, like, yeah, the same day you'll be performing better, but kind of in the long run, you'll actually be performing worse because you're depleting your dopamine. And so it really depends on the nootropic, but everything from as you raise the dosage, you'll get diminishing returns, more side effects. Some things you won't get more side effects. You'll just be, to be honest, wasting your money. So it really depends on the nootropic, but with a lot of them, I mean, I would say I prefer to kind of create more maybe synergy within stacks, and I don't like to overdo it on a nootropic, just because. And with some of them, like I said, there's not side effects, but just because you can use more of a nootropic, is there really going to be a benefit to that? Is it really going to help, or would you benefit more from maybe adding in another synergistic nootropic, or maybe, changing something in your life to kind of help pair with that nootropic? Because the lifestyle piece of cognitive enhancement is super important too. And that's something that a lot of people, I feel like, leave out when they talk about the nootropic discussion. People will ask me, what nootropic should I take to help with my life? And they, work a job they hate, they're in a relationship they don't like, and those things will deplete you in a way that nootropics can overcome. So again, another long-winded answer there, but yeah, it depends on the nootropic. Some of them, as you go up in the dosage, will have more side effects. Some of them will just be wasting your money. So I always tell people that you shouldn't try to think of it as like, ooh, I'm going to take this nootropic up as, even with caffeine, I'm going to take caffeine up just as high as possible because more is better. Instead, make it more synergistic, either with another nootropic, or maybe you need to sleep more so you don't need as much caffeine. But I think a more kind of intelligent nootropic protocol design will allow you to not need to try to push the nootropic up as high as you can, or as high as you can maybe tolerate that day.
So, real quick, because I wanted to go back, I didn't want to glaze over this. I thought this was really important. The acronym that you said earlier, BDNF, can you break that down so people have a little bit of a helping hand to understand what is happening within their body?
Yeah, so BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's kind of one of the growth factors in the brain that's important for growing new neurons, which is, a process known as neurogenesis, which is the creation of new brain cells. And this is a very important process really for everything, for your memory consolidation, for processes known as neuroplasticity, which is how well your brain can kind of mold and wrap around a situation, right? It's exactly how it sounds. Like if you're depressed, if you think of someone who's depressed, they lack a lot of neuroplasticity because they're stuck, they're depressed, they can't think outside of like, the box, and so they get stuck in that kind of like depression zone. And so it's very important for neuroplasticity, allowing your brain to mold around situations. You got fired from your job. Okay, instead of being stuck in that, you can now work past that and mold your brain to it and move forward in that. And then, like I said, so it's going to be great for memory. It's neuroprotective. It's going to be great for kind of evolving and kind of, I guess you could say, growing your brain and creating a more plastic brain, which is what you're going to get from the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, aka BDNF. So it's a very important kind of growth factor. Where it gets a little bit complicated is that a lot of people think that creating, which if you guys know nootropics, purely creating neurogenesis is, the key to building a better brain and helping with things like depression. But a lot of the drug, like there's a drug known as NSI-189 that actually was very powerful at promoting neurogenesis, but failed in clinical trials. So the key with BDNF is neuroplasticity. That's what's kind of being studied in the literature right now, not the neurogenesis specifically.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating that when you tell someone, "Hey, man, you can grow your brain,"
Yeah.
like that's just not a thing, but it is a thing, and
Yeah.
it's when it's utilized in combination with all the supporting tools, just like someone in the gym. You can't your squat is not going to go up by only doing squats. You need those supporting things, the accessories, and so by utilizing other things such as high quality bioavailable forms of magnesium, this complements it too. And I think there's a really fascinating thing. I don't know how much you know about like what it is that I do, like with the coaching, aside from like the pro bodybuilders and whatnot, but I deal with a lot of people that have autoimmune related issues, suffer from neurological diseases, things like that. So this is something that we focus pretty heavily on with getting a proper amount of choline, proper amount of magnesium, things like that, dealing with inflammation control, not inflammation suppression. And what we've been able to see in this combination, and not just from one particular thing, but, like I said, in combination with all these things, is that you're able to, one, reduce the risk of type 3 diabetes, inflammation of the brain. You're getting better workouts because now the neurons are firing correctly. So you're getting the proper signal from the brain to the muscles. So you've got better pump, you're getting better nutrition throughout the body, things like that. But the short and long-term memory recollection is mind-blowing. So one of the things that I recommend a lot of my people to do is when they join the team is do something that's not fitness related, primarily learn another language, do something, a master class, whatever it may be, and utilize that to be as efficient as possible. Because it may seem so redundant, be like, okay, I'm going to do Duolingo while I walk on the treadmill. Yeah. And then 6 months later, hey man, look at you. You've retained so much of that information, and maybe you don't travel to another country. Maybe you never utilize it, but it's a cool skill to have. So if you can keep growing, getting the brain to work in different pathways, because the left and the right side of the brain do different things. And that's a different discussion about going down with the split brain project from the 50s and what brainstorming is and whatnot and how to deal with all that. But the important thing that this big ass circle getting around to is the one thing is not going to fix everything. It has to be in conjunction. You need the supporting tools around it. And then everything works great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what I like, how I kind of compare it to people or tell people, with the lifestyle piece, why it's so important. It's like you probably had times in your life where you were, like I said, maybe you just got into a new relationship, you just started a new job, you feel really good. And that in itself is almost a nootropic, right? Like it's like when you get with a girl you really like, you feel energized all day, you feel like you can tackle your tasks much better. And then the flip side is true too. When you're stuck in a job that's kind of suffocating you, or a relationship that's suffocating you, you feel worse. You feel like your brain isn't working well at all. So your lifestyle in itself is really a nootropic, and I think it's important for people to wrap their heads around that, and not only setting up your lifestyle, but like you were saying, whether it's learning a new language, reading books, learning new concepts, learning music, all that stuff is so important to train your brain in the same way that we train our bodies, So a lot of people, as the nootropics kind of become more mainstream, I think really leave out that lifestyle component. And that to me is one of the most important things, is learning a new language, learning how to play an instrument, playing there's tons of brain games and puzzle games you can do. And it sounds so basic, but it really is so powerful, especially when you pair it with a good lifestyle, you enjoy your life, you like your life, and then you pair it with the nootropics, you're in a really, really good spot.
Yeah, I remember I was a kid, obviously, as you can tell by my face, many, many moons ago. But my mother got me involved in the speed reading class. And as a kid, you're like, this is the stupidest shit ever. I cannot begin to tell you on how much that has benefited me as an adult by being able to read more effectively. Oh my God. I mean, that is probably one of the most ingenious things that I've ever been a part of. Like, it seems just so simple. Like, you're going to read faster, but man, being able to retain that information, to not just like in one ear out the other, you're like, okay, I read it, I comprehended it, and I held it. Like that's huge. But sticking with the emotional side of things. So I know we talk, the mainstream people, if you will, there's a big talk about the combination of Selenk and you pronounce it Cemax, Cemex.
Cemax, yeah.
Okay, I know what you're talking about, but we'll get it right.
Yeah.
So these are really interesting compounds, and the history for them is also equally as interesting. Now, I have my recommendations for people and whatnot. When someone contacts you and they say, hey, Brandon, I need help. I want you to, devise a protocol for me, help me, be my coach, do all these things. I'm not there mentally. Like I've got internal demons that I'm dealing with, and this is, I think, the way that I want to go. What would you recommend to someone, and why? What would be, the combination or the one thing that you're like, this is the thing that's really going to help, deal with the dopamine related issue?
Sweet. Yeah. So if someone has internal demons, right, and kind of the protocol for that. So there's a few different routes we can go down, right? And again, I've talked to people who are in the research space right now for specifically depression, internal demons, whatever you kind of want to call them. And like I said, so the focus there is on neuroplasticity. And that's why things like ketamine or esketamine are getting very popular. But of course, when you're dealing with someone who's having those issues, the first thing you want to look at is kind of their lifestyle. How are they living? What's their situation, right? And not everyone can change their situation, but you can work to adjust it or at least make it better, right? If you're at a job you hate, you at least can put yourself on a plan where you say, okay, I hate this job, but I'm starting this business, and maybe it won't be tomorrow, but in two years, I'll be able to get out of this. And I'm at least setting myself up to move out of it. Or I always say relationship. I feel like relationships can really be taxing for people's mental health and mental wellness a lot. So first things first is lifestyle. Make sure that they're healthy. Make sure that they're sleeping. Make sure that everything's kind of, in order as it should be. If everything is, which there are times it is, then you kind of move towards more of the, pharmacological interventions you can do. And in my opinion, the best route we can go down for that is something likely serotonergic. Whether it's a SSRI, which some people respond really well to, some people do not. Whether it's, psilocybin microdosing, which again, some people respond really well to that. I think serotonin is probably the best neurotransmitter we can use to help get people out of those spaces. The problem with things like, say, GABA is it's just not very sustainable, right? GABA can calm you down, it can relax you, but in the long run, your GABA system's very sensitive. So with people who are in that mindset where they're struggling, I think serotonin's very important in creating neuroplasticity in the brain so that they can kind of get out of it. So serotonin in creating neuroplasticity, which a lot of things that do raise serotonin will also raise neuroplasticity. But again, that neuroplasticity is going to allow you to see things from a different angle or vision. And, like a really good example of this is if you've ever tried psilocybin, and we were talking about this before off not recording, but if you've ever tried psilocybin or if you've ever even tried something like a ketamine therapy, it really allows you to view the world from a different lens that you wouldn't be able to with a sober mind, and it allows you to kind of learn those lessons and understand those things where it's like, and for me, like for a lot of times it might be obvious things. It might be things like, hey, I need to stop being friends with this person. But with your sober mind, we get caught up in the day-to-day world. We get caught up in our egos and kind of the, frameworks of society. Mushrooms allow you to think outside that box and allow you to really, bend your brain around in a way that you wouldn't be able to normally and see things from that different angle, which allows you to have that, like I should really cut that person out of my life. They're really negative. They're bringing me down. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of pull yourself out of that. There's kind of the tried and true, which is typical psychiatric medications like SSRIs. And then it's super cool to see all these new compounds like ketamine and mushrooms coming into the scene because they have such a strong impact on neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. And again, allowing you to see your situation from a different perspective or a different angle. I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, I definitely want to go down the mushroom rabbit hole because it's fascinating. And me personally, I know the quality of life that it's been able to generate for me is fascinating. And I've got my own, ways of meditation, and that's a different discussion. But before we go down that road, I did want to stick to one thing. So to kind of give a little bit of a deeper dive into some of these things, because I'm a huge fan of Noopept. But for a couple different reasons. Probably not what most people utilize it for. Like the way that I would coach people, or my recommendations, I got to say that, would be utilizing them as, like an hour before, you do any kind of major studies, stuff like that. It's great for knowledge retention, things like that. I've noticed, and I did notice that this was very dose dependent, and I thought it was fascinating that if I can stick between 5 and 10 milligrams in a nasal thing, not in an oral and not in an injection form, I did notice that the nasal one worked obviously extremely fast. But with Noopept, if I take it as a pre-workout, the muscle contractions are so insane that my explosion coming out of the hole on any lift, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, something as simple as training forearms, you work onto preacher curls, whatever it may be. The explosion coming out of a hole is at least a solid 40% of an increase. It's crazy. I'll go back and I'll film my videos. I'll look at them and be like, dude, that weight flew like it was nobody's business. And I say that it's dose dependent because even at a higher dose, I didn't really notice any improved gym performance. There was no, your emotions can only be so much. You can only be so scared. You can only be so happy, and your muscles can only get so pumped. What I did notice, though, is that the brain was overstimulated and I couldn't focus. That I'd just be like in la-la land for everything. I'd pull out my phone to change my song, and next thing you know, I'm checking work emails when I'm supposed to be at the gym. I'm like, oh shit, I've been standing here for 15 minutes. It's in la-la land. So when I tone down the dose, primarily with Noopept, if I can keep it around 5 milligrams, I still get very good gym performance. I don't get the crazy brain fog. Have you noticed other things that generate similar experiences?
Yeah, so in the context of using nootropics kind of for athletes, I mean, there's so many cool applications you can do, and I've noticed too the form in which you take it is very important. So like you were saying, like typically for a lot of these peptides and nootropics, the nasal form works really well and the sublingual works really well, but since the nasal is just so close to the blood-brain barrier, it seems to make it hit faster and more effectively and more efficiently. And then there's other things too. I mean, one of the most powerful things, and I think one of the companies blew it up, it was, I think, Better Through Biology, is the injectable choline pre-workout. And I've noticed for athletes, when you inject the choline, it becomes much more potent at kind of establishing that mind to muscle connection, aside from taking it orally. Because a lot of guys, I know they'll take alpha GPC or they'll take whatever, and I'm like, okay, try a choline injection. A lot of times it's with carnitine before the gym, which potentiates everything really effectively. But what I've seen is when you inject the choline, it tends to become much more potent in the specific context of helping to solidify that mind to muscle connection. The other thing that I've seen be very powerful for a lot of athletes, which is interesting, and when you talk to a lot of athletes, they'll tell you this, is it seems like psilocybin, and psilocybin mushrooms, in fact, have a downstream dopaminergic effect. Psilocybin seems to also be very beneficial for people pre-workout, whether it's, and the two groups I've seen like it the most is fighters, so people who are doing, kickboxing, all that stuff, and a lot of the powerlifting guys seem to benefit from a lot of like kind of skill-based activities seem to benefit a lot from these strong neurological drivers. And I've seen that injectable choline and psilocybin, interestingly enough, and obviously the dose, like you were saying, the dose is so important because if you take too much mushrooms before the gym, I mean, good luck, that'll be a fun workout. In your head, you might be having a great workout, but you're going to hurt yourself or hurt someone else, who knows. But those strong neurological drivers seem to be really effective. And then if you pair the injectable choline with Noopept, I find that amazing too. But those are two that I've noted are really effective for athletic populations specifically and seem to have really good outcomes. But anytime, you can throw in those neurological drivers, and it's the same, and I wouldn't tell athletes to do it, but strong neurological drivers, especially dopaminergic agents, and you see it with androgens like Masteron is a really good example. The DHTs are very dopaminergic. those also seem to be very beneficial for people trying to get that mind to muscle connection and that neurological drive and learn new skills. And even if you were to take, which I don't recommend for your heart, but something like a powerful dopaminergic stimulant like Adderall before the gym, which please don't do. I'm just, painting the example. That is also going to very much be important in helping you learn a skill and learn that mind to muscle connection that comes with kind of the physical skill. So the neurological drive is very important. And for a lot of athletes, finding a good neurological driver that they can use, like Nootropics or injectable choline or psilocybin or whatever, or a DHT if you're enhanced, can be very, very beneficial.
I'm going to add to that, but real quick, fun fact, DHT products generate ridiculous erections. Noted.
That is true as well. That is a good, that is also a great benefit.
That's a good selling pick. Yeah. Super boners. Take Masteron.
That, yeah.
So I noticed this completely just out of the blue one day. I drive a ridiculous amount. I think last year I drove like 57,000 miles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, my tax write-offs are insane. But that's one of, I was going to say it's a problem. It is one of the cool side effects of my job of going to all these different shows and doing all these presentations and whatnot. But I did notice, and it's consistent. It wasn't like a one-time fluke. When I'm very brain focused, and I say brain focused, I don't want to say stimulated because that's not the right word. When I'm hydrated, well-fed, and nootropic, my sense of speed doesn't seem to really exist. And so we're talking about the fighters and, skill-based things. And I know that when I'm really focused, especially if I'm taking, it could be something, like lion's mane, completely over the counter. I definitely feel as if I'm almost watching myself from behind myself. Like I'm having that guardianship. So I noticed I was driving the other day and I'm looking down at the speedometer and I am going the speed limit. I'm going the speed limit. But it didn't give any sense of speed. It felt as if I was doing 20 miles an hour. And so I started paying attention to it, and more. It didn't matter whether it was my car, my wife's car, whatever it may be. I don't have a sense of speed. And I don't know if that I don't have a sense of speed or I don't have the anxiety that comes with speeding. Have you ever had any experiences like that to where everything just kind of feels, I don't want to say that it's not scary, but almost as if you could just kind of tackle anything. Like it made me want to go race go-karts because I felt like the anxiety was gone. I'm like, I'll just pass everyone. I'm awesome. I'm Jeff Gordon now.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that when you're operating at kind of that higher cognitive level, a few things happen. Definitely some of the nootropics might be lowering anxiety, which anxiety can oftentimes get in the way of our performance. So it could be that, but I've noticed that too. In fact, while driving, it's like when your brain is just operating at that 110%, whatever you want to call it, you feel just so in control and you see things in a way that's clearer and more, like when you're driving, like a good way that I describe it is I do feel more comfortable to drive faster because I think in my brain, like you almost, it gives your brain almost a better ability to kind of perceive what might happen. Like I'll kind of be like, ooh, this car, like I'll catch little things like, oh, this car in front of me is starting to veer over a little bit. I wonder if they're going to come over and try to cut me off. And sure enough, they do. And so I think it's the ability for the brain to perceive those little things that maybe makes, at least from my perspective when I'm driving, me more comfortable to actually drive faster because I'm like, oh, like my brain is catching all these little things and piecing them together and giving it back to me. And I just feel more confident. Whereas if I'm not nootropic out, and if I'm tired and if I've been driving all day, I'm much slower to catch these things. So I'm like, oh shoot, this car almost just cut me off. I almost missed that totally. So I think, and that kind of applies too, and like some of the fighters, you hear talk about it who take it, they say that when they take things like psilocybin specifically, they can almost better anticipate and not see the future, like you don't think of it as seeing the future, but they can better anticipate what their opponent would do, whether it's they can read their body language better, or they can just, feel like, or have better pattern recognition. So I think it's those processes that when your brain's functioning higher that you pick up on, that allow, at least for me, to feel much more in the driver's seat and more comfortable to maybe drive a bit faster, because I'm picking up on all these little processes. Like I knew that guy was going to get over before he even did, just because I was picking up that he was kind of veering over. So I'm more comfortable to drive faster, if that makes sense.
It's like real life Spidey tingles.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Yeah, for sure.
So real quick, what I'm picking up from all this, because we're saying getting the brain to function better, right? From what I'm taking from it, because I used to fight powerlifting now, but when I take psilocybin, I would think it slows your brain down a little bit to make it more aware, almost like a meditative state. So are we actually
different strain?
So we're just making it more efficient, I would assume. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want people to get confused. Like, oh yeah, it speeds up the process. It's more of like, I think it slows you down a little bit. Like you were saying with anxiety, right? It brings you back into awareness.
But I think a lot of it has to do with the particular strain of the mushroom, because I know that certain ones, even at a micro dose, give me an inability of proper motor skills, to where like, okay, I'm going to reach for this cup, and then it's like in super slow-mo that my hand's moving. And then like, I really enjoy a particular strand called Avalanche, because it doesn't affect my motor skills, but it stimulates my creativity, to where if I know that I need to get, several months worth of work done in a short duration of time, I'll take a lower dose, go sit in my office, put on some nice, calming music, and it stimulates, and you can feel it. It feels like the back part of your brain is sending out little electrical signals from within, and you're just like, dope. We're just going to get everything hammered out. You still get like the weird mushroom yawns, but you're very alert. That's okay. We'll dive into the mushroom thing real quick, since we talked about it. What is up with the inability to sleep when you take mushrooms? Do you have that issue?
Yeah. A lot of it is just because they're very dopamine, like they are dopaminergic through kind of their mechanism of action. So you're getting more dopamine, which is another reason why it can be problematic for depressed populations. SSRIs tend to do the opposite. You'll get a decrease in dopamine when you start them, and it's actually beneficial. A lot of people think, oh, okay, if someone's already depressed and they have less dopamine, they have less drive. But the problem is when you have an increase in dopamine when you take these, which is probably why you can't sleep on them potentially. The problem is a lot of times when it comes to suicide, what people need to go through with the suicide is that energy, is that motivation, is that drive. So if you give someone mushrooms who potentially is already suicidal, it could actually be problematic that you see the raise in dopamine, because it's giving them that before where they were so dead and flat and tired, now they're like, oh, I'm awake now. I'm good. And it very much so may help take them out of that space, but it's just worth noting that if you give a depressed person energy and motivation and they're already kind of suicidal, that could be the thing that pushes them, because in order to go through with suicide, right, and this is very gruesome, but you need to have planning, you need to have motivation. If you're just so like stuck all day with no drive, you're probably not going to be as likely to commit the suicide. So that's why SSRIs might be still a little bit more beneficial for certain populations, because they actually lower that dopamine initially, whereas mushrooms seem to raise it.
That's an interesting perspective. So normally when we do the podcast, I always start with a story, and it usually has nothing to do with anything. It's just a story from my life. But this was a fun little caveat into a situation that happened a couple months ago. Getting the house, all closed up for bedtime and whatnot, and my wife breaks fresh sourdough and whatnot. So I had the cutting board out, and I had a knife out there, and she goes, "You got to put the knife in the sink." I'm like, why? The sink's clean. Like, I'll just wash everything in the morning. And she goes, no, put the knife in the sink. It makes me uncomfortable, because what if someone broke into the house? And so my first thought was, how fucking lazy is this guy who's trying to murder us? He didn't even bring his own tool. And then I thought about it even more, because then my brain just kept going with it. I was like, you know what? If I was going to break into someone's house and kill them, I would use their knife. Why would I bring my own? That seems like a lot of homework. Not everyone has a knife block. Some people keep all their knives in a drawer. And if you didn't stake out that house, you don't know what drawer that is. So there you are, rummaging through drawers trying to find the knife to murder someone. That's too much work, homie. You just got to bring your own knife. End of discussion.
Yeah.
Don't be a lazy person.
Yeah. It's a good segue.
Nootropics and bring your own knife.
Yeah. Nootropic stack for committing crimes. That's interesting. I never thought about that before. That's a funny, I like how you got that from baking sourdough.
Hey, man. My life is an adventure.
Yeah. That's a funny evolution. I know that's if someone told me that we went from baking sourdough to planning home invasions with a knife, I'd be like, how did we jump from that to that? But it's interesting. You made it work.
I mean,
it's fascinating.
Hey, man. That's how champions are made. You just adapt and overcome.
Exactly.
So, before we go down the mushroom rabbit hole, the SSRI thing. So, and I know everyone's got their own opinion on it and whatnot, and the objective is to provide usable information so the people can make their own educated decisions. With that being said, I have no personal beef with SSRIs. I know a lot of people that take them and they thrive. And some people take them, and there's different ones, they do different things, and they have adverse effects, so they want to come off. And so I've helped people come off and help mitigate problems and whatnot. I don't think that they're all bad. And just like a GLP-1, like semaglutide or something like that, I think kickstarting a program, kickstarting your mental health, getting things in order so you can just use it as, the first domino, that first thing to tip over and get you going in the right way. I'm game for that. If that's something that, someone feels that they need to go down and they just need that extra little bit of a help, they need, a popular one, Zoloft, they're unable to manage their mood. Sure. Work on it, start feeling good, start making the life adjustments, and then figure out, is that something that you need to continue on? Now, with that being said, I know we talked a lot about like relationship issues and whatnot. You're going through the turmoil of heartbreak, and you've got, a horrible job situation. You got a 2-hour commute because of traffic. You've got all these negative things building up against you. At what point, does someone look at it and go, you know what, I need external help? Where does someone go for something like that? Like, is there, like the starter SSRI? Yeah. So that's interesting. So the thing that is, SSRIs are just in general very controversial, and especially kind of in our space with, biohacking, bodybuilding, whatever, our kind of shared space. They're super controversial. And what I try to tell people when I talk about SSRIs or when I give my opinion on SSRIs is that I really don't have any backing or motivation to promote SSRIs other than I just think that they can be effective tools for some people. And just like how some people take gear and anabolics and it works really well for them and they have minimal side effects, and other people it derails their whole life. Same with SSRIs, same with really most medications, right? Some people it works really well for, some people it doesn't work well at all for. And that's just the nature of pharmacology and how it responds and how it reacts to our own individual genetics. I've taken an SSRI and I responded really well to it, but I also acknowledge that a lot of people don't. So I think my problem is people who fall into the line of thinking of just because something is a pharmaceutical, it's problematic. I know that there's a lot of people in the space who think that, but at the end of the day, even a lot of these research chemicals or research nootropics are compounds that are being designed, whether people like it or not, by like big pharma to, create the next generation of pharmacology. So again, a lot of people get very angry and upset about SSRIs. I try to, ease their minds by telling them I have really nothing to gain. But for SSRIs, that's the interesting part of it too, is like how far down the life rabbit hole do you go, because some people do have very poorly set up lives and they do bring it upon themselves, and it's like,
okay, dude, like you got to get your life together first. And if you're still having issues, you know, then you need to start one. I would say, yeah, look, if you have a life and your life is well set up, you make good money, you love your family, you have a genuinely pretty happy life, and you're still like, something feels off. That's where I would definitely start to look to go down the SSRI rabbit hole and talk with your doctor, talk with your, you know, if you have a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist, talk with them about it first. But if your lifestyle's pretty well set up and you're still like, something's off here, that's definitely when you need to. Now, if your life is a disaster and you're overweight and you're super stressed all the time because you're, again, surrounding yourself with situations and people that you hate, I would say fix those first and then assess how you're doing. And if those all get fixed and you still feel terrible, then the SSRI would be good. But first, I think it does come down to fixing lifestyle as just a logical first step. And again, there's no issue to that. If you fix your lifestyle and you still feel terrible, you need an SSRI, well, at least your lifestyle's fixed now. In terms of like a starter SSRI, or like people always ask me about is my thoughts on like 5-HTP, which is a supplement. I think that for most people, a lot of the natural herbs are fine, but they're not super effective. And even if you take 5-HTP, the problem with some of these more serotonergic herbs is that they tend to raise, because serotonin receptors are all over the body, and especially in the heart, they can be very negative, very cardiotoxic. So if you're just taking a bunch of 5-HTP, it's not as selective as SSRIs. SSRIs are pretty selective for the serotonin transporters, specifically in the brain, and they raise it through obviously inhibiting the reuptake of serotonin. So beginner SSRIs, I think like maybe like before SSRIs, CBD would be good for people to help kind of them relax. It's not serotonergic, it's not working the same, but I think that's honestly a good one. And that one too, oral is very low bioavailability, but if you're feeling like, okay, I want something to kind of relax, I think like CBD, magnesium, even glutathione to lower neuroinflammation can all be good kind of starter ones pre-SSRI.
Interesting. Man, it sure seems like glutathione is just used for everything.
Yeah. It has a very nice calming effect especially when you get the IVs done, and that is coming from the neuroinflammation, because neuroinflammation drives anxiety a lot of the time. So if you ever get a glutathione IV done, I remember one time I got a glutathione magnesium IV and I went home and it was like 3 p.m. and I passed out for like 5 hours. I was so calm. I was so relaxed.
Say, you probably fell asleep and then had the biggest shit of your life.
Yes. That is why I never did it again, is because my stomach was destroyed. Not fun, but very relaxing until that hit.
Yeah. So I did want to ask you something. I saw that you posted something the other day, and I was really, really fascinated about this just because I'm a big nerd myself. Surprise. Peptides. Peptides are so interesting, but the way that you administer them is usually, for the most part, pretty straightforward. You know, a peptide is a string of amino acids linked together, and it tells the body a particular command to do. Most of the time we see them as like a subcutaneous injection, depending on what they are. Every once in a while you hear someone do an intermuscular one. But you talked about an oral one, and not everything is always held in solution. Like, for example, like when we deal with bodybuilders and they're like, oh, I have a really hard time finding Caber. Well, you don't see Caber at a research chemical company because it doesn't hold in solution in a liquid form. So there's a weird gray area in there, so it cannot be manufactured properly. So when you deal with the peptides and whatnot, and you know the other oral research chemicals, some of them just don't hold in solution, and depending on what they are, it requires different things for them. Blah blah blah. The oral ones are fascinating because I get it. A lot of people are terrified of needles, even little tiny 31 gauge, you know, the same size you do for Botox. We know you don't feel it. And so you just, you know, pop, throw it away in the sharp container, carry on with your day, la, 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 la. The oral ones appeal to so many people. One, why is it not more available? Is it because that it's expensive to manufacture, or does it just change the way that you're able to actually utilize that particular string of peptide?
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole goal with the oral peptides or with topicals or with nasal sprays or whatever, for me in my head, is to just really bring it to more the mainstream population. I try to get people past the idea, because everyone jumps and says, oh, it's an easy shot, who cares? But it's like, okay, but if your goal is to put it to the mainstream population, then the mainstream population is not going to be okay with injecting. It doesn't matter if you're okay with injecting. The mainstream population is probably going to say, who's used to taking supplements their whole life. I think of people like my parents potentially, and I love them, but they would never inject. So I try to think more so, okay, there's a peptide from a, mechanism of action standpoint that probably can work for everybody. Like everybody could benefit from a peptide. The flip side, though, is that most of these have to be injected. So it's like if we can get them into orals, or if we can get them into kind of nasals, then I think you open the door to a lot more people, and you can help a lot more people with them. So that's kind of was the first thought process I had. And then the second one, why more people are not doing them orally, is because if you use just if you just get ipamorelin raws and you put it in a capsule, and I'm sure if the oral peptide thing takes off, there's going to be people who do it. Or if you suspend it in a solution, even if you can. I don't know if it suspends in solution or not. I haven't tried. But if you do that, you can do it, but it's probably not going to be super effective. In some peptides, it is effective. You can use BPC with the arginine, and it works well for the gut. Other peptides, you need a more robust process. And that's where the oral ipamorelin isn't just oral ipamorelin. It's not just raws mixed with, PEG or DMSO. It's using aquasome nanotechnology. So it's nano-sized, then protected by an aquasome as the delivery method. So it's a very robust delivery method. And really, if we're going to take peptides into the oral realm, or even a lot of these into the topical realm, because some of them are big molecules. So if you're talking about topical peptides, you need, if it's above the 500 Dalton rule, it's not going to permeate through the skin very efficiently. So you need a more robust kind of topical delivery system so it can permeate the skin. So a lot of the conversation when it comes to topical peptides and oral peptides, and I really hope that conversation, that door gets blown open in 2025. People just need to understand that just because you can do something as a topical or you can do something as an oral doesn't mean it'll work. Because a lot of these molecules don't work as orals, but if you apply a more robust nanotechnology or liposomal technology to them, they then can work. So with the oral ipamorelin, I try to explain to people all the time, it's not just we didn't just put the raws and mix it with solution. It's a very robust aquasome nanotechnology that we applied to it that I think allows it to be effective.
Now, I know quite a bit about ipamorelin. Is there a reason that was the one that was chosen to experiment with?
Yeah. So there was full intention behind it, and the reason is because as a molecule, it's superior to MK677. On paper, at least, it raises blood glucose less dramatically. It seems to raise prolactin less dramatically. Just the main issue is that it has to be injected 3 times per day. So my thought process was, if we can take a molecule has a cleaner target mechanism of action to it than MK677, but make it oral, then you have a potentially really good peptide product, that's going to be able to give people the benefits that they would get from MK677, but in a much cleaner way. The half-life's also much shorter, which I think is beneficial. And then you don't have to deal with MK677's kind of poor mechanism of action and poor way it exerts its effects, and you can use something like ipamorelin, and you don't have the barrier of you have to pin 3 times per day. Because even I don't care about pinning peptides, but 3 times per day with a busy life is tough,
Right. You got stuff to do, and that's a huge hindrance. Yeah, and I think that was the big appeal with MK was okay, it's not an injection. I take it once a day. It's active for 20-ish hours. It sounds great on paper. And, you're like, okay, great. Growth hormone is released periodically throughout the day. You're stimulating the duration of the pulse. Sure, it sounds great. You're increasing ghrelin, blah, blah, blah. And so I get it. When you stimulate ghrelin being the hormone that regulates your appetite, growth hormone follows that. But when we look at things like, here's a great one, tesamorelin. Now, I know a lot of people will tell you oh my God, tesamorelin it's the most superior one. It does all these great things. And I guess you could make the argument either way. I want my appetite because I want to grow. I'm trying to stimulate growth hormone production. I'm going to increase my IGF levels. I'm going to eat more food. All that food is going to, get shuttled into the cells. But for someone who's not looking to be ravenish, with their appetite, you end up with those issues like with the GHRP6. You're just 15 minutes. You're just like, oh shit, like watch out buffet. Here I come. But you look at other things like, okay, well, I want to increase my recovery. I want to increase the quality of my skin, my hair, things like that. So I see a huge market for something like that. Is when we look at it on a cellular level, is something like, it doesn't have to be testosterone, but something like testosterone available in something like what you're doing with the oral Imperellin?
Yeah, well, that's going to be the goal of 2025 is to get the full kind of catalog of peptides out. And we've gone through and we've picked the ones where we're like, okay, let's first try it. And look, at the end of the day, I'm always realistic with people in this too. I'm not the position right now, as much as I wish I could be, to go fund some multi-million-dollar, double-blind, retrospective, multi-year study. But at least for the ipamorelin, what we did is we've had 3 cups, because it's the drops are virtually flavorless. So we mixed it with, and you can't see them, they're clear. So we had 3 cups, they all looked the same, all tasted the same. And so I drank the cup, and the goal was to figure out, what am I taking? So one of them was BPC, one of them was ipamorelin, one of them was semaglutide. So 3 things, all pretty different, and all I would be able to tell. So the cup I drank from, waited 30 minutes, and I felt that hunger come on. I was like, okay, is this the cup that had the ipamorelin in it? And they said yes. So it was like a blind test, but it was cool because I felt that hunger like from MK677, but it was in a much shorter duration. So that way I was able to eat, potentially boost it short-term, eat, but then not all day be hungry and be cheating. It seems like, too, a lot of these ghrelin things like MK677 don't just raise hunger, but they raise your body's desire to eat unhealthy food. I don't know why that is. It's like how the GLP-1s not only make you eat less, but I feel like you want to eat cleaner on them. MK677 has the opposite effect. You want to eat more and you want to just eat the most, unhealthy food possible. And so the
salty cravings, for sure. The first time I tried it, all I wanted was chicken wings.
If you have a DoorDash account and you have money to use on DoorDash,
delicious.
I guess you can finance it now. You can have a fun time with MK677. But yeah, the goal is to get all of them out. So the goal is to do the due diligence, send it out to people to try. If we get good feedback, launch all the peptides as oral. That'd be a really cool goal. And I think that the secretagogues have a lot of potential, because even with oral MK677, the problem is it has such a long pulse of growth hormone release that when that happens, your body senses it and it raises the somatostatin, which is a growth hormone inhibiting hormone. And so that long release is fine, but it's also still not ideal, because you don't want it raised for that long. And I think that long release and that overly long half-life is why we see MK come with all the side effects it does. When it comes to blood glucose, it seems to be one of the worst when it comes to all those different side effects.
Yeah, and I don't want to shit on it, because does it work?
Yeah.
Yes, that's how the pharmaceutical companies are pushing it so aggressively, and it's turning and doing big stuff for them. So no qualms with that. It does it work? Yes, for what it needs. But yes, just like anything, there's always going to be, some fine print that comes with it. But with the oral thing, we touched on DMSO real quick and made me think. Many moons ago, I used to own my own research chemical company. When we used to manufacture the SARMs in-house. And so the combination that we used was PEG 300, vegetable glycerol, with 10% of that volume being DMSO. So the uptake for it was fantastic, but everyone, including myself, had the exact same complaint, that when you sweat out DMSO, it is such a horrendous smell. Holy shit. Yeah,
it's rough.
That is a rough one. Oh yeah, what a wild time to be alive. Yeah, those are good days.
That sounds like fun.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, but if you have a little bit of time, I did want to open it up to a little bit of a bro chat.
Sure. Yeah.
Josh, before I get going on my rants, you got anything?
Nothing really, man. I mean, a lot of comment we went over is pretty awesome to hear from my perspective, just because I'm still not like fully in depth on those things. So it's kind of nice to hear the perspective of someone who's very versed in it. So thank you, Brandon, for that. I think a lot of the stuff, like I was saying with just brain function and whatnot, I'm big on, meditation, awareness, trying to find that slowed down pace. And psilocybin did that for me. So I just will enjoy, like I said, what I took from it was it gets you to slow down a bit, like with the fighting, right? It's not necessarily that they're seeing the future, but they're perceiving small, minute actions in a more efficient manner, so then they can adjust accordingly. So it just tells me slow down, which I love. And that's where a lot of meditation and stuff like that for me comes in, even with lifting. I mean, I don't get amped up anymore before a big lift. I actually like to sit and meditate for a few minutes prior to the lift and visualize it and then perform. But no, it's just really cool to hear your perspective, man. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. It's cool because there's definitely a nootropic kind of for everyone. Same with peptides, so it's always fun to kind of, even if you start the conversation and they think that maybe they wouldn't benefit from them, kind of by the end of the conversation, and not that you think that you wouldn't benefit, but by the end of the conversation, they're always like, okay, I could use this or that to kind of help. I didn't even realize like that I could use a nootropic for that, So it's always cool to talk to people.
Oh yeah.
So I have an oddball question. And I say it's an oddball one just because most people don't use this particular peptide, but the ones who do really enjoy it. PT141.
I knew it was going to go there.
The nausea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured.
So the nausea that comes with it, everyone responds to it differently. And I get it, more people that have run, Milano Tantu are pretty aware of it. Is there a way to mitigate the nausea, or is it just, person by person base? Because when I take it, it's been a little while now, because now that I'm back into my first phase of growth into bodybuilding again after many years, I don't need it. That's the last thing I need. But when I did use it, good times, but consistently, 10, 15 minutes of nausea followed by 6 hours of kind of a rapey vibe.
That's a funny way to put it. I've never heard anyone say it like that. It does raise sex drive significantly, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're going to go like out to the club with, a shirt and the collar button up like, hey,
yeah.
Hey. You're just, for me, I'm married, so I'm at home and I'm looking at my wife.
Yeah.
Like, hey.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, make that sourdough, girl.
No, yeah. That's, I've never heard anyone call it like that. That's funny. That's it seems, so, okay. So to answer, so with the nausea, I would say what you can do. So actually, the nasal spray version is less effective, but it really alleviates the nausea significantly. So if you really struggle with the nausea, I would say try the nasal spray. It still raises sex drive significantly, but it makes it a lot more tolerable for sure. And again, less effective, but again, you don't have the nausea. So I've noticed before, that was like my biggest issue with it is, of course, if you're about to have sex with a girl, with your wife, whoever, and you're feeling like you're going to throw up, it's not beneficial or conducive to a good sexual time. So there's that. And then you can also, if you don't use it regularly, if you use it like once or twice a month, and I know you were talking about this in the very beginning, I think you can take it with like an over-the-counter, it seems like an anti-nausea and antihistamine medication works well. Again, I don't use PT141 super regularly, so if I use it twice a month and I take like a anti-nausea histamine blocker with it, it seems to help with a lot of the redness and with a lot of the nausea, so I'm not super sick when I go into it, because I don't use it regularly to begin with, so I'm not a fan of blocking histamine with kind of the typical over-the-counter ones like that, but if I use it twice a month, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and that's a very unique peptide. It's like dessert. Like you don't need to have dessert every day, but when you do have it, enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a fun one. That's good for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of different stacks you can take with that. I've noticed cannabis and PT141 makes for a pretty crazy time.
I don't think weed's in my wheelhouse. I've tried it a couple times and I just never got anything from it.
I actually would say for most people, mushrooms, like if I had to take 10 people and I had to guess how many people would respond well to mushrooms, I'd say 8 would probably, but if we're talking cannabis, I'd say probably like 4 or 5. It seems like it's definitely for a lot less people get benefits from cannabis, it seems.
I get like the anti-inflammation things like with high dose CBD and stuff like that. Like that's a noticeable change for me. But from a psychological standpoint, taking, THC of any particular strain, for me, I don't notice anything. And it could be one of those things where I'm not noticing it because the change is happening relatively gradually and it's not a huge like, oh my God, I'm having an out of body experience. But I don't notice any calming effect, anything like that. The only time that I ever noticed any change is someone gave me a super high dosed edible and I had Chick-fil-A for the first time.
Oh, there you go.
Ooh, girl.
Oh, it's Sunday today too. Why would you say that? That sounds good right now, actually.
It is the Lord's day.
Oh, dude, yeah, that sounds delicious. But
there's just so many different things to help people, and I think that they're all fascinating. I feel like I'm broken record. I'm like, it's so fascinating because it is. It's really fascinating what you can do for changing everything, from changing the way that you think, changing the way that your body, breaks down food. The antihistamine thing is a really fascinating one. So years ago, I have the world's greatest chiropractor. Without a doubt, I will take the Pepsi challenge any day of the week. So my chiropractor is such a unique individual because he doesn't do the normal pop and crack stuff. He specializes in neurological related things, but he also does a thing called tap therapy. And so the way that he introduces himself to this particular, a session that he's dealing with you is he will hold one of your hands and he's essentially mumbling to himself. He's asking these questions and he's getting energy from you. And then when your arm collapses, that is whatever the ailment is for that particular question. And the first time you see it, you're like, this guy's a fucking quack. And so I went to him and he's a former college athlete. And so he loves people that are in tune with his body. And I went to him, I said, look, man, like when I'm bench pressing, I feel like my left pec doesn't have any stability in the top half of the range of motion. And so he's doing his little mumble and my arm collapses and whatnot. And he goes, it's not your chest. He goes, it's your back. And so he goes back and right underneath the scapula, literally 2 fingers, and does this little swipe. And within 10 seconds, you could feel all the blood coming to the pec. And it was so fascinating. And he's done other stuff. Like I've had hamstring issues where I'm like, dude, like I feel like I cannot catch myself as I'm going downstairs. And he goes, that's because the muscles are turned off. He goes, and your quads are overcompensating and your hamstrings are not actually active. And so he'll do something similar. And he has this little pressure monitor. It kind of looks like the size of like a Palm Pilot with a spring on it. He's like, lay on your stomach, puts it on the Achilles heel. He's like, now push against it. First one, 7 pounds. I'm like, is that good? He goes, no, that's horrible. So he does a little 2-finger swipe thing in a particular spot. And he's like, do it again. 34 pounds. I'm like, oh shit, that's dope. That was in like 7 seconds. So we did the other leg, same thing. And I was like, okay, he's pretty for real. But this very long circle to get back to this whole point about the antihistamine thing is he showed me a study, this is years ago, that antihistamines are showing to stop and potentially backtrack rheumatoid arthritis. However, it is limited. The current studies are limited to rheumatoid arthritis. It is not for the other ones. So if that's something that does, come involved with, family history, it's something to look into. Obviously not the ones that strip choline out of the brain, but the other ones. The other thing with it too is talking about inflammation suppression, or inflammation control, not inflammation suppression. So the abuse of NSAIDs like acetaminophen, ibuprofen, things like that, of course, everybody knows they're extremely liver toxic. The death toll for abuse of NSAIDs is ridiculous. But from a neurological standpoint, what they're doing to the negative impact of sending out the proper signal from your brain to the muscles is completely catastrophic. So it's very, very important to understand inflammation control and not inflammation suppression. By understanding that, adjusting your food and your lifestyle to help you in these things, not only are you able to deal with autoimmune related issues, primarily things like Hashimoto thyroiditis. When you look at blood work and you look at TPO and you can check your inflammation markers, by addressing that one style of inflammation control, it snowballs such a positive lifestyle for everything that you do. Your recovery is better, your sleep's better, your mood's better, your sex drive's better. When you lose the stress and you lose the cortisol, your subcutaneous water retention goes down. So that one aspect of your life literally can snowball and change everything about it.
Yeah.
That was a very long-winded way of saying that antihistamines are not the devil.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. And that's kind of the issue you see with a lot of people nowadays, is they have all their biases towards certain pharmacology. And a lot of the times when you break down a lot of these, it's like the truth is kind of, it's always boring, but it's always somewhat in the middle, right? It's not that the drug is all evil, or it's not that the drug is going to be all good. You know, I mean, that's what a lot of, cannabis people do it all the time, where they talk about how perfect cannabis is and how there's nothing wrong with it and there's no side effects and you can't overdose on it. And then you realize like, oh, okay, well there is some issues with it for sure. But yeah, like the truth with a lot of these is that they're somewhat in the middle, and it depends on usage and kind of how frequently you use it. And that changes the conversation dramatically.
Absolutely. I have some bro questions for you that have nothing to do with what we just talked about.
I'm excited. Yeah, let's see.
Okay. So you travel a decent amount.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you eat out?
Yes.
On your travels?
I will eat out when I travel, yeah.
Okay. We're going to rapid fire this.
I'm ready.
Okay. Major chains only, not mom and pops. Best hamburger. Fast food. I got to say that. Fast food chain.
Best fast food hamburger. I mean, it's basic, but I'd say In-N-Out does it pretty well. California, West Coast. I've grown up my whole life with it. You know what? Does Smash Burger count? Smash Burger's a West Coast thing. Smash Burger's pretty good.
That counts.
I don't think I've had one of those.
They're good.
Yeah?
Do
you guys do. You guys definitely do, yeah.
I think we do.
Yeah.
I've had it. So.
Okay.
That's
a
good one.
I'll find one. I think
that counts, yeah.
Good.
Best French fries.
Chick-fil-A, for sure. And it's Sunday, so I should stop talking about. We gotta stop talking about Chick-fil-A on a Sunday, but definitely Chick-fil-A.
Okay, so I was gonna ask best chicken sandwich, but I think we've established.
Well, I would. You know what I would say, and you guys probably know what it is, but Kiki's. Have you had Kiki's chicken?
Oh yeah, Kiki's is good.
You haven't had Kiki's? Oh my goodness.
No.
There's one in Roseville, I think.
Yeah, they're all over down. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to try it.
Well, apparently I'm gonna go on a road trip. I'm gonna find
It's close. You'll love it. It's so good.
Kiki's. All right. Controversial one. Best milkshakes.
Best milk. I'm not a huge milkshake guy, but if I'm gonna get a milkshake, I'll get the McDonald's, the Shamrock Shake. That's a good one. That's the one milkshake I'll get.
Okay.
Seasonal. Well done.
Okay. I asked Josh this the other day, and honestly, it really made me question our friendship.
Oh, whatever.
Bro, your answer was fucking wrong.
No, it's fucking right.
For a mass audience, this is a two-part question. For a mass audience, what is the number one cheese that you would get like at a sandwich shop or something like that? Not your personal favorite, but what is just the mass audience?
Oh, not like what do I think the mass audience would get? I mean, I feel like a Swiss or provolone, right? And they're interchangeable. Whenever people ask me, is it okay? Yeah, they're like the same to me. But
and I'll have you know, he did not address that question to me like that.
What is your
bullshit? You didn't ask the question like that to me. Sir.
Well, yeah, because yours was wrong.
Pepper Jack is the shit.
Okay, what is your number one cheese?
Pepper Jack is good.
Jack.
I'm a Swiss or provolone guy myself, so I guess I fit in with the main. I mean, cheddar's good. American cheese is. I mean, that's on a sandwich. No, it depends if
that's not
even
that's
cheese.
Not
that doesn't
cheese.
count.
That's
yeah.
chemical warfare.
But cheddar, Swiss, or provolone's fine. It's a safe bet. It works with things. Josh is not happy. Josh hated that answer. Josh is team Pepper
okay.
Jack.
I'm outnumbered here, but I'll still stick with my answer. Pepper Jack for the win.
Pepper Jack is. I'm a Swiss, provolone, or cheddar guy. I can't deviate. I wish I could.
Okay.
Provolone has such a mild flavor palette that it just goes on everything. You expect chicken parm, bro. They're not having no chicken pepper jack.
Why not? There's no rules. I'll do what I want.
It's a tough flavor.
All right, fair enough. USA. Okay. Real quick nerdy question, and then if you got anything, by all means add it. Carrier oils for traditional gear. Like I talked about this the other day on one of my Q&As where I briefly talked about it because otherwise I feel like people just kind of like zonk out. Social media just wants attention. They don't want knowledge. There's very few people that really thrive with obtaining knowledge. They just want to be entertained. You know, that's why TikTok got so famous. Dance for me, monkey dance. When you look at carrier oils, okay, we'll just stick with testosterone because that's pretty standard. And we see that with, traditional big pharma, let me phrase that, mass production big pharma, such as companies like Sun Pharma, what used to be Watson, which is now something else. Who do I get my stuff from? Avalon. All the major ones use cottonseed oil. It's hyperallergenic, and while there are other ones that are also hyperallergenic, that seems to be the standard. It's on the thicker side, and so when we start looking at different compounding pharmacies, when they're truly compounded there, I see a lot of them in the U.S. utilizing grapeseed oil, which, for the most part, it's nice. It flows through a smaller needle pretty easy and whatnot. And then we start seeing some of the other things. We start seeing MCT oil. If you have a chemist who understands all sorts of weird stuff, then you see things like Migol. The problem with Migol is even though it goes through a 29 gauge really easy, it's really, really expensive. It's legitimately 60 times the price of an injectable, sterile MCT. But my question for this is not, what do they do and whatnot? There's a difference when you're utilizing the carrier oils and the drug breakdown. So I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but you do, testipinate, whatever it may be. You will just, a long ester test, cottonseed oil. Pretty standard. You do your shot, carry on with your day. You do something like MCT oil, and you feel it so much faster. Is there, I'm sure there is, I'm setting that up for failure. What is the different oils doing to either slow down the absorption or allow it to be more, I don't want to say that's more bioavailable, the faster absorption?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and if I ever am faced with something where I'm not sure, because I'm very familiar with carrier oils and whatnot, and which ones typically seem to respond well and which ones have different effects, but I'm not sure what byproduct or what downstream mechanisms that the esterase enzyme that kind of cleaves it off would interact with the carrier oil to make it absorb faster or slower. That's a very interesting kind of question, probably rabbit hole to go down, for sure.
Yeah, because I used to work hand in hand with this chemist years ago, and I remember I asked him something special, and I was like, "Would you be willing?" So backtrack on this. I work with a lot of different doctors. And over the years, I've had a lot of doctors that were just so fascinated by the bodybuilding world that they just wanted to be a part of it and monitor what went on. And so years ago, I had this one doctor, and she was so fascinated with everything. This is years ago, before I had a kid, and I was just this gigantic human walking around, just crushing sidewalks. And I said, I really want to do a test suspension protocol. And she was like, that seems pretty extreme. I'm like, I know, so let's do it, right? It sounds cool. You know, when you're young, you're like, oh, 2 shots a day, like, whatever. But the inconvenience of utilizing a water-based testosterone is absolutely atrocious. The needles get clogged all the time. Then you end up having to cut it with like an injectable B12, something like that. And then you become this injection ninja where you're trying to draw it out, switch needle, stab yourself, go. And it just became... it was so much work that it wasn't even worthwhile anymore. And so I met this gentleman, and it was a real chemist. And so part of the deal is like the doctor worked with the chemist and at this compounding pharmacy. And so we got to do all sorts of fun stuff. So he made me T&E, test no ester, but he added this thing, and I'm drawing a blank on it, and it's driving me crazy. I thought about this half this podcast. It's like, fuck, I should have wrote it down. I just know it starts with a P, and it increases... I don't want to say it increases the bioavailability. That's not true. It increases the uptake into the red blood cells. And damn, I'm drawing a blank on this. Do you know what this particular compound is called?
Starts with a P, and so he's adding it to the brewing process.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm not sure. Starts with a P. We'll have to figure it out. Yeah.
I'll come up with this, and then we'll have a part 2 for this. But anyway, it made such a difference. It was wild. It really made that big of a difference. It's like, well, how come more people don't use this? Well, the second part of that, just like the DMSO related issue, it made you smell like bad vagina for hours. Oh, it was horrendous. And it would come through like, you know, just like every other testosterone bottle. It's a little 10 milliliter glass vial with a rubber, stopper on it. And you could smell it through that. So you would have to keep it in a Ziploc bag. Otherwise, your entire house would smell. But it was kind of worth it. So it was just such an interesting thing because during that time, this is before they did the big ban on EO oil in European manufacturing, where, you saw a lot of European stuff that everything was suspended in EO. You could keep things in a higher milligram solution, but then when they found out the detriments of what EO oil was doing inside your body, it's got to go. But yeah, it was one of those things where it worked so well, and I just always wondered whether other people didn't utilize it because the smell was so atrocious, or there was other issues.
Yeah. It wasn't propylene glycol. It wasn't polysorbate. It wasn't not glycol. None of those.
No. I'll find it, and we'll have a continuation.
I mean, you got to think too when you're mass brewing stuff too, and you have to deal with an ingredient like that. It can screw up the whole lab, and with the smell too. I'm sure that's pretty vile. If you're brewing with it, I'm sure it's disastrous if it gets out at all. But interesting.
No, it was gross.
Yeah.
It was gross for sure. I don't know why anyone hung out with me during that time frame, but it's whatever. Good times to be alive. Well, I appreciate you coming on, taking time out of your day. Yeah. Real quick before we wrap it up, plug everything that you do. Where can people find you? How do people get a hold of you for help?
Yeah. So my main platform's Instagram at biohackingyou. I think it's right there. And then so I have that. I have a website linked to my bio with articles and stuff. I have a YouTube. I have a Reddit subreddit where you'll see more like kind of protocol based right now stuff. I have a Discord community. I would say join the Discord community, or I have a WhatsApp. If you go to my website, there's a communities tab, a WhatsApp chat group. It's a bit unorganized. Or if you want more organized, join the Discord, YouTube, Reddit, Instagram's my kind of main one. But yeah, those are like my main ones. They're all biohacking you. If you go to my Instagram though, and you go to my website, you'll find everything nicely kind of organized.
Cool. And then aside from just being an educator, you also coach, correct?
Yeah, I do. You know what? I haven't. I'm finishing up school right now, so I took a little bit of a backseat on the coaching because I do a lot of the stuff comes from the affiliate sales, but I took a backseat on the coaching. But I'm considering doing it again and getting back into the coaching and consulting because it is fun to help people. But once I started school this past semester and finishing up, I took a bit of a backseat. But yes, I do. I'm gonna get that rolling again.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Josh, you got anything to add before this man with good cheese taste takes off for the day?
Oh, good cheese taste. Are we gonna do? We're gonna ask him for the fun life advice, like we always do at the end of ours.
Yeah. Go ahead. I've been talking my ass off. Go ahead, ask him.
All right, Brandon. So when we end ours, usually we like to end it with philosophical idea or just a good outlook on life, some life advice.
Yeah. I mean, I would say if I have like one piece of life advice is, I think balance is just the best, and I think if you focus on creating a balanced life, that will maximize your happiness. And I think when people think about balance, they think about, like, a lot of people think about the world in such a black and white way, and they think either I have to give my whole entire life to growing a business, doing entrepreneurship, being a CEO, or the other flip coin of that. And I'm young, so I see this from my perspective, but is like, oh, I gotta go out and I gotta, have fun. I have to be, this party animal. I think balance and just not seeing the world in a black and white way is the key, and it's the way to go. If you have balance and if you can pull experiences from all different things, and you can, during the week be hardworking and on the weekends go out, have your fun and grow like that, I think that's the most important thing. I think for whatever reason, in kind of the current climate of social media, people are falling. I think it's just because extremes sell really well. So people are always falling into kind of the extremes of ideology or of how to live your life, or you have to wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. if you want to be successful. And if you go out to the bar and you go, have a few drinks on Saturday night, you'll never be successful. So I think bringing it back to reality, and I think bringing it back to more of a balanced middle ground is good, because you can be very successful, build things, be a very hard worker, and still have that balance and still make that time, kind of have fun. So have balance, stop seeing the world in such like a black and white way, because I think there's a lot more nuance. So it's my life advice.
Awesome, man. Yeah, great answer.
Perfect.
On.
Awesome.
Yeah, we feel like we talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
I said you can't be textbook smart all the time, because you're going to have to be a little bit retarded.
Yeah.
You got to find
Yeah,
out.
100%. Awesome.
Well, on that note, my friends, it's time to go be retarded.
Thank you, guys.
All right, brother.